I'm going to do an overview of hardness testing. So this is the first virtual lab we're going to do. I'm going to do several different hardness testing methods, but I just want to talk about what it is and why we do it. So the hardness of a material is the resistance of that material to penetration. So we measure it by penetrating the material with what's called an indenter or a penetrator, okay? So it's typically just a conical shaped that's harder than the material you're testing. Most of these machines will measure how far that indenter went into the metal. Hardness testing is really useful because it tells you a lot about the material without being too destructive. Now, they do have other kinds of tests, like a tensile test or a compression test, that will take the metal and literally pull it apart until it fractures. This gives you the exact strength of a metal, but it destroys the metal in the process. A hardness test will typically just leave a little dimple on the metal, depending on the hardness test being used. So the first test I'm going to talk about is the Rockwell test. Rockwell is the most common test out there. Most people kind of have an idea of what the different Rockwell hardness values mean in practice. So for Rockwell numbers, the higher the number, the harder the material is. There's different scales for Rockwell. For the purposes of this class, I'll just talk about A, B, C scales, but there's many, many others for testing softer materials, like plastics or composites. Rockwell C is used for hardened steels. If you try to use it to test something like aluminum, it won't give you a good answer. It's not quite made for that. It'll shoot straight into the material and kind of bottom out, so it'll give you a nothing answer. Rockwell B is for most steels, aluminums, irons. Rockwell A is kind of a general purpose test that can do a little bit of both, and I'll talk about it more in a later video. We're going to cover at least Rockwell, Brinell, Vickers, and the portable Lieb test in this class. So I'll make videos about each one of them and show you how to use them. One thing that's common in all hardness tests is they each have their own units. So by units, I mean like pounds, inches, meters, how the thing is measured. So they're totally arbitrary. It depends on the machine you're using and the process you're using. Rockwell uses the Rockwell unit, so it'll usually look like hardness Rockwell C or hardness Rockwell A, HRC, HRA. Vickers uses their own. Brinell uses BHN, so Brinell hardness number. So there's all sorts of different unit systems out there. What you don't want to see is a hardness value given as a whole number. So it would be totally incorrect to say, hey, this has a hardness value of 50. You'd have to ask 50 what's, 50 Rockwell units or Brinell units or Vickers units. So you should always remember, if you do a test, go ahead and write down at least what machine you're using, and in the case of a Rockwell, what combination of indenter and load you are using.